The Royals might have another hidden gem courtesy of the Royals pitching development. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15 and find us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, and plenty of others. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started today. And if you are that first-time listener, you want to know who I am, why we do this show. Well, we are big Royals fans here. We enjoy talking about them every single day, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be through this episode. We bring you 5 episodes a week. I try to get them to you every evening. Sometimes we get them in the morning or the early afternoon, all based on my work schedule. And I'm over at Sports Radio 810 WHB, do lots of stuff over there. But as I just said, when it comes to this podcast, we're only talking Royals 5 days a week, and that's going to continue all the way until December. So even into the offseason, we'll be bringing you episodes Monday through Friday. Unless I'm out of town like I was last week on vacation or I'm sick, I'll always try to find a way to make it up at some point throughout the weeks. I know that the week before I went on vacation, we had 7 episodes that week. So Monday through Sunday, had a couple of interviews as well down in Surprise, Arizona. And there's still a lot of busy things that are happening down in Surprise, Arizona. And it's not just the newbies in camp. It's not just Jack Caglione or Jonathan India, who's hitting north of 400 in the first couple games that he's played in. Also has been at third base, has been in left field. Michael Massey has been out there in left field. I mean, there has been some storylines in camp, but one that has recently caught my eyes and is going to get more recognition as we progress throughout spring training. We get into March, and there is a hidden gem, we'll call him, in camp, and somebody that I didn't envision having as impressive of a debut, mainly because watching his stuff in the Arizona Fall League and catching some highlights last year when he was in Quad Cities and eventually when he made his way to Double-A Northwest Arkansas, the curveball was elite. And I loved the spin rate on it. It was his put-away pitch, and I am talking about Luinder Avila, who has been added to the 40-man roster, 23-year-old, was a bright pitching prospect for the Royals, but always seen as more of a development than a prize piece. He was somebody that you were going to have to season a little bit. You were going to need to take your time with him. And in the end, it might not be enough. And looking at him at his age, where he was in the minor league ranks, I thought to myself, yeah, that could be a middle reliever. I thought that, maybe if all things worked out well and there was an opening in Kansas City at some point this year, maybe he makes that jump from Double-A to the big leagues, or he does get the Triple-A, has a couple outings, and you fast track him to Kansas City. We've seen him do it before. The Royals did it with Carlos Hernandez. The Royals did it with Angel Serpa, and their numbers weren't that impressive where they were pitching. They just felt that the stuff was going to be good enough to play at the big league level. So with Avila, he goes out there the other day and he starts pumping 98-mile-an-hour sinkers, 98-mile-an-hour fastballs, pairs that with a very strong curveball, and you start to wonder, you start to dream a little bit about what that looks like, if the gun in Arizona is hot, why the Royals had faith to put him on the 40-man roster. These were all things that were running through my mind, at least, because the Royals aren't stupid. They're not going to add somebody to the 40-man roster just because you want them to or because they're seen as a good prospect. Sometimes it's somebody that's not that close to the big league level, but there's a chance that with a strong camp, they can open a lot of eyes. And with Avila, that's something I believe he did on Monday afternoon. A 98-mile-an-hour sinker, if located well, can play in any bullpen across Major League Baseball. And with the curveball that he has, the spin rate we were seeing yesterday, the spin rate he generates with that pitch, that can play at the big league level. And one of the concerns with Avila throughout his minor league career was a little bit of that command. And I wondered to myself, is it because he doesn't have a great control or great command of one or two pitches? Is it across the board? Can he locate the fastball well enough? Is his secondary pitch just not playing as well as he would like to? But when you're sitting 94 to 95, unfortunately, you don't have the luxury of having bad command. You really don't. That's the way I view it. If you're throwing in the low 90s, maybe maxing out at 95, I don't want to see the bad command, because 93 to 94 without much control is not valuable whatsoever to a bullpen or a rotation. Now, we're talking 97 to 99 mile an hour sinkers. I can live with somebody working with that type of talent. We saw it with Angel Serpa last year. Once that velocity came up, there wasn't a reason for the Royals to abandon him because the stuff is too good. Why do you believe Carlos Hernandez has stuck around for so long? That's a triple-digit fastball that you want to be able to harness. You want to pair it with another good pitch. The positive for Avila is he's got that secondary pitch. He's got that strikeout pitch with the curveball, with the slider. And to add a 98-mile-an-hour fastball / sinker, that can play in the bullpen right now. And that, I believe, is why the Royals added him to the 40-man roster. And it's another feather in the cap to the Royals pitching department if it works out. If this is a hidden gem guy who's young, has years of control, developed a couple different pitches, and showed up to camp throwing like this. Now, velocity is not everything. We all know that now at the big leagues. And in fact, when I was talking to Lucas Ursig last week, we asked that very question about velocity. Everybody in the big leagues can hit 100. And if you can't locate it well enough, you can get crushed. Or if you don't have good enough command, you aren't going to stick around long enough in the major leagues. And so for Avila, a guy that you could definitely say is still more than a few steps away from the big leagues, this now puts him on the radar. This now puts him in a spot where with a strong camp, the Royals can bookmark that and say, he's going to throw some big league innings for us this year. And if you want to raise the roof a little higher, if you want to raise that ceiling a little bit more, you can dream up a scenario in which he's a starter. Oh, that stuff can play pretty well as a starter if you can harness the fastball, if you can harness the sinker. This goes back to 2023 when the Royals were fixing Chris Bubic. Most of us would like to say Cole Reagans is the poster child, and I do believe that Cole Reagans has to be the poster child. But to me, this began with Chris Bubic. When Brian Sweeney and Zach Bove and everybody across the minor league level started working with some of these guys, developing new pitches, having a new plan of attack, that's when we saw some of the changes. Chris Bubic enters 2023, and before the Tommy John surgery ends his year in April, he was looking like the best starter in the rotation. We saw Brady Singer last year start to come into his own a little bit. Cole Reagans, as I just said, the poster child of the Royals pitching development and turning him into an absolute superstar, an all-star, an ace of a rotation, and an ace of a playoff team. James MacArthur had a flash in late 2023, was the closer, had moments in 2024. That was a guy that was given up on by the Phillies organization, a 27-year-old with a 6+ ERA in AAA. There's no use for that anymore in the Phillies organization. The Royals found value there. And then you get to, guys like Daniel Lynch, working with him a little bit more at the minor league level, turning into what he became in September. Noah Cameron, a 7th-round pick out of Central Arkansas, slowly making his way up the ranks. And when he was drafted, I guarantee you there were a lot of people that said the stuff's there, but it's going to be a long shot to get to the big leagues. Just because anybody outside of the top 5 picks are always going to be a long shot. The Major League Baseball draft is a crapshoot. We all know that by now. With Avila, I believe if you would have asked me in June of last year, I would have said, I like the repeatability. I like the curveball. I like the slider. It pairs nicely with the fastball when it's located well. But I was not going to go as far to say he was my favorite pitching prospect, or I believe that he was going to be a starter in the rotation or a guy that could help out in the bullpen. After one outing in spring training, he's officially on my radar. And I'd imagine he's on the radar for the Kansas City Royals. You throw a 99-mile-an-hour sinker, and you've got your strikeout pitch, which is a curveball and a slider. that can play in the big leagues. In fact, that could play in the big leagues right now. I don't believe you need to look at him and say, well, take your time, season him a little bit more. If you view him as a future starter, then okay. But I don't believe the Royals added him to the 40-man roster with the hope of seasoning him a bit more and really working on everything where it's going to take an extra year or two. He's 23 years old. He can pitch in the big leagues, and I wasn't confident the stuff was there about 365 days ago. Now to see that type of heat with the curveball, there's something to watch there. Now when he's going to be in that pitching lineup, the scheduled pitchers where you have the starter throw two and maybe Avila gets an inning or two, he is somebody I've got my eye on. Carlos Hernandez didn't look as good in his first outing of spring training. Got a little bit better in the next go-around. Steven Cruz has looked fine. Evan Sisk has looked fine. Now you have to look at Luinder Avila and maybe make a case that he could break camp with the team. One outing's one outing. It is spring training. I'm purely going off of stuff and what the Royals have done in the past. You throw like that, you've got to put away pitch like that, the Royals are going to have interest. And that sinker is new to me. That sinker at 97, 98, 99, it's not the 94 to 95 he was throwing in the regular season last year in Quad Cities in AA Northwest Arkansas. That is a legitimate pitch to pair with a strikeout pitch, and he is significantly raised on my rankings for the Royals' top 30. He might jump into the top 10 now. And I'm all about stuff in spring training. If you watched us last year, that's what I would go off of with pitchers. I don't really care about the ERA. I don't care about, well, I do care about the swing and miss, but the strikeout totals and the walk totals, I can live with it if you got stuff like that. And he's going to battle some command and fight some command, and the Royals can't put him in a position in the bullpen where that's going to be a high leverage spot from the get-go. You're going to need to ease him into that if he's in Kansas City early on in 2025. He wasn't even close to being on my radar of breaking camp with the team. He still has less than a 10% chance of doing so, but there is a spot that he could be competing for. The Royals probably want to take some time with him, but whereas my original pick was maybe a September call-up, and he still could be, now my pick is more so in the first half of the season and helping this team out of the bullpen with velocity like that and a curveball / slider like that. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's go over some of the guys that are struggling and if I'm worried about them only 5 games in to the spring training schedule. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. For our next segment, this is going to be in the opposite direction of what segment 1 was and what we're pivoting for segment 3, which is not showing any concern for the guy that was out on the mound on Tuesday afternoon in Seth Lugo. No, this segment is going to be dedicated to a couple of guys that haven't gotten off to a great start, but am I worried about them, and do I believe they need a really strong spring to either lock down a spot on the 26-man roster or if they need a strong spring for confidence and confidence only? Number 1 on the list is Carlos Hernandez. I would say that even though we bounced back today, I am a bit concerned because that first outing he had was really rough. And in spring training, when you are competing for a spot and you're out of options, you might not get an opportunity more than once a week. You might only throw an inning or two on Monday, and we don't see you again till Saturday. It's just the way it goes when trying to build up some of these arms and to get a look at everybody. As we talked about Luinder Avila, we saw him the other day. We might not see him until Thursday or Friday, or maybe even later than that. Sometimes the later you get in camp, you like what you've seen from a guy, you send him to the minor league camp, and we never really hear from them until maybe the regular season starts for high A or double A or triple A. But with Carlos Hernandez, that first outing was rough. And that looked like a typical Carlos Hernandez outing when he struggles, which is a fastball that is thrown very hard, but is very hittable. It's a straight 99. It's a straight 100. And the other pitches, you're not getting anybody to bite on it. I have enjoyed this transformation of Carlos Hernandez in being more of an accurate thrower. And I'm using my words there carefully. we say with pitchers, they are a pitcher. They go out there and they can paint the zone. They're painting the corners. They locate things well. They set up the hitter. Everything about them screams a alpha pitcher or a confident arm. I mean it when I say that he is a accurate thrower. He is a hard thrower, and he's started to get better with that command. But a thrower at times is not a pitcher. When you look at Carlos Hernandez, he's either on or he's not on at all. And I was hoping in spring to see that hot start. The velocity there, he is a thrower. He's always going to be a thrower. But when he's on, he is one of the more valuable pieces to have in that bullpen because of the pure stuff. You throw triple digits, you are going to be able to get a lot of guys out based off velocity alone. But if you don't have that command and that secondary pitch is not being set up as well, then you're going to have a hard time sticking in the big leagues. I mean, Carlos Hernandez last year, when he was struggling, whether it be in AAA or in the big leagues, he was a thrower. When he came up in August and September, he was a confident pitcher. He was a strong arm to have in the bullpen. And going into spring training, he wasn't healthy last year in spring training. Now that he is, I look at him and I say, he's one of those guys that has to have an impressive spring. He's got no other options. And I don't think the Royals would want to DFA him and let a Tampa Bay or a Cleveland or somebody get a hold of him because they might be able to fix what the Royals couldn't. And that happens across the league. The Royals pitching development and the Royals pitching department has gotten better. Still, they're going to lose some guys that go and catch on somewhere else. It's bound to happen to everybody. And Carlos Hernandez is one of those guys that they really don't want to let get away. The stuff is too good. The size on them, he's a big workhorse on the mound. He had started games before, had the upside, was finding himself a little bit as a reliever, and then it just hasn't worked out since. Now, I will say this. He bounced back in a big way today. It was a clean 1-2-3. The velocity was good. Don't believe he got any strikeouts. Still, I'll take the 1-2-3. Hunter Harvey had a clean outing as well, and Angel Serpa had a perfect 1-2-3 in his outing on Tuesday afternoon. But right now, that bad outing, I will say this. He can't afford another one. He can't afford another one where he gives up 4 runs in 1 inning. It's just not going to be good enough to look at the workload, the sample size in spring training and say, yeah, we got to keep him because he's out of options. There could be guys like an Avila, like a Evan Sisk, like a Steven Cruz that could rip that spot from him. So he's one on my radar that's not playing as well. The second one is MJ Melendez. That's one I can't ignore at this point in time. It's so early, and trust me, I'm not saying this just for MJ and me being a guy that supports MJ Melendez and wants so badly to see him turn things around. But with this new stance, we have seen far too many strikeouts. He did hit a ball hard the other day with runners in scoring position. It was to third base, so using the opposite field. That's always a positive sign. For me, when I see this new stance, the key to it will be sticking with it when you're still getting comfortable. There might be some 0 for 4s and 3 strikeouts in spring training that the later on we get when the players get more stretched out than they are right now. There might be an afternoon like that. There might be an evening like that, but it doesn't mean you should abandon the entire approach. And I don't think he has, and I don't believe he will. This is the stance that he has to stick with. He's been working on all offseason long, and sometimes it just takes a little bit to get going. Last year's stance that he changed to, it was great right off the bat, right? It was a strong spring for him. The numbers were good. The power was good. The exit velocities were good. Did it translate to the regular season? It didn't. And I'd imagine that stance was comfortable to him because it wasn't too far off what he was already doing. This is a drastic change. The hand placement's different. The stance is more closed. The load is different. That's going to take some time against live pitching to get truly comfortable with. So am I worried? Unfortunately, Melendez hasn't given us the benefit of the doubt. Right? It'd be one thing if he had put it together for an entire year last year or the year before, and you go, new stance, I've seen him do this. It just may take him some time. In the 3 years he's been in Kansas City, he hasn't put together that solid season in the big leagues. Hopefully this is the one. It would go a long way in improving this lineup. But so far in spring training, Too many strikeouts, in my opinion. Hasn't looked too good. It's a good thing, though. It's only 5 games in. He's only played in 2 of the games, I believe. There's still plenty of time to turn things around. And once that first hit falls, I'd imagine that the confidence will start to rise a little bit, and you'll get more comfortable in that new stance and know that it is going to work long-term, because it has to work long-term, or he's not going to have a job in Kansas City. And lastly, the third name I did want to bring up here, I will give some credit that Jonathan India, Michael Massey, phenomenal today. Those are 2 guys that are tearing it up. Michael Garcia had a 2-hit day. Bobby Witt Jr., I want to say only has 1 hit so far in spring training, so his average doesn't look too good, though who cares? Bobby Witt Jr. could go 1 for 30 in spring training. It's not going to matter at all. Vinny Pasquantino had a terrific day at the plate. He's another guy that was shining. The third name, though, that I am going to bring up here is Kyle Isbell, another starter. And I understand that the 3 guys I did bring up are 3 players that are constantly harped on in the comments section. When I do a post-game recap or I'm doing a new segment, those are guys that are often criticized. But with Kyle Isbell, he's one guy that I'm not sold needs to have a great spring to prove anything else. The defense is going to be elite. And I'm not sure that a strong spring, he had a good spring last year as well. I'm not sure a strong spring is going to change my opinion as to the player that he is. I will always state that Kyle Isbell needs to be a league average hitter to be one of the better center fielders in all of baseball. Goes without saying that. If you're a great defender in center field, a valuable position like that, hit 230 with a 320 OBP, just hang around the middle of the pack, truthfully. If Kyle Isbell was a 230 to 250 hitter, he would be a top 15 center fielder in all of baseball. That's how good he is defensively. Unfortunately, even with some of the hits that he's had, I want to say he's got 1 hit, maybe 2 hits in spring training. Just nothing that is jumped off the page initially to think that anything might be differently. He is going to go into the year with that pressure of needing to perform at the plate. We know the defense is going to be good, and we understand that defense is incredibly valuable. However, somebody in that outfield group has to improve. That outfield group was not good enough last year. And of one of those 3, it can't just be on the defensive side of things or at the plate. It can't be one or the other. It has to be both. Of one of those 3, it has to be Kyle Isbell being a league average hitter, maybe Hunter Renfroe being a somewhat old version of himself. And I don't mean that in age. I mean more so the 2022, 2021 Hunter Renfroe, where you're running the 25 bombs, drive in 80 to 85 runs, and then you handle yourself in the outfield. MJ Melendez, same thing. A 20 to 25 home run hitter, you hit 250. That's what Royals fans are asking for. And in spring training, MJ Melendez, he's got the change in the stance. Hunter Renfroe looks like he's slimmed up a little bit. Kyle Isbell, the defense has been good so far, but offensively, I'm still waiting to see a little bit more. And those would be the 3 guys that I would say right now are struggling just a little bit. However, after today, a lot of the batting averages look great for the Royals because they hung 15 runs on the Texas Rangers. And tomorrow, they are going to send, I want to say it might be Michael Wacha on the mound tomorrow. The Royals are one of the few undefeated teams in the Cactus League, if you care about that. It will be Michael Wacha tomorrow against the Colorado Rockies. First pitch will be at 2:05 Central Time. Don't think that this game is going to be televised. Yeah, looks like both are just going to be available for audio, and then you can always follow along on StatCast for some of that stuff. But Royals and Rockies will be tomorrow. We'll see if any of the guys I just mentioned either pitch or in the lineup. I'd imagine that Carlos Hernandez will not be pitching tomorrow because he already pitched today. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, I'm going to tell you why a regression from Seth Lugo isn't too worrisome for me. Dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our one and only sponsor tonight in FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And for my pick, I am going to turn to that Dallas and Lakers game that is coming up here in about an hour, I believe, actually, from the time I'm recording this. I'm going to take the over on points for Luka Doncic. I feel like I failed on that the last time, but I'm not going against Luka in a game like this. I will take the over for his total in points. The final segment that we're going to dig into involves the man who was on the mound this afternoon. Seth Lugo gave up 3 runs in 2 innings, gave up a 3-run bomb to Leody Taveras of the Rangers. Other than that, though, can't complain too much. That happens to some of the veterans. One of my favorite stories about spring training was when James Shields was first in Kansas City, and he got rocked in one of the starts. And he was just throwing fastballs the whole time. That's what some of these veterans will do, and I need to work on a pitch. It might get ugly, but hey, I'm here for a tune-up. I'm here to work on things. I'm not here to lead the Cactus League in ERA. I'm not here to win a pitching title or a triple crown in the Cactus League. None of that is going to truly matter to them. And for a guy like Seth Lugo building off a career year, you want to make sure that the regression is not as drastic as some people are expecting. And we can all be honest with ourselves that eventually a 35, 36-year-old pitcher is going to show his age. It is a sport that is unfortunately always beaten by Father Time. And I would say sports in general has never been able to beat Father Time. And Seth Lugo, I don't want to say turn back the clock last year because he had never put up a season like that before. But we would expect an ERA, an inning workload, and strikeout total, all that, whip totals to be comparable to a 25, 26-year-old, right? We're talking Tarek Skubal and Cole Reagan's type numbers, what Seth Lugo for 75 to 80% of the seasons was able to match them with. Never the strikeout numbers that Reagan's and Skubal had, but Seth Lugo was leading the league in ERA for a large portion of that season before at some point in the second half, he regressed a little bit. But with Seth Lugo, why I'm not too worried is something that I felt pretty confident in around 3 or 4 o'clock today. I know it's not that long ago that I decided I'm not going to be worried about Seth Lugo in 2025. But in that first inning, he threw 9 different pitches. 9 pitches. And that was something he did last year. That was something that got him out of a lot of jams, being able to throw a 4-seam, being able to throw a changeup, a sinker, a cutter, a sweeper, a slurve, a curveball, a split finger. All of these pitches allowed those numbers to be put up at the end of the year. Why we were so confused by a truly second-time starter in his big league career to be a from game 1 to game 162, I'm only starting games. It's only the second time it happened in his big league career. San Diego being the first time in 2023, and then he was able to do it last year with the Royals. Why those numbers look so good was that he could use 7, 8, 9 different pitches in one at bat at times. Even if he was grinding it out with somebody, he didn't need the triple-digit fastball. He didn't need this ridiculous pitch that was unhittable. And I would say his curveball was pretty unhittable. It was a buzzsaw. The spin rate was north of 3,000. That was almost impossible to hit for a handful of hitters. But when you're asking me if regression is going to happen, I'd imagine so. I believe slight regression. I do not believe it is going to be severe regression for that point and that point exactly. You throw 9 different pitches, that's a lot for a hitter to sit on. If you're down 2 strikes, he might give you the split. He might give you the change, the slurve, the sweeper, the curve, or he's going to hit you with a fastball up and in, at least if you're a righty. That is so much to worry about. And if Seth Lugo was a 3-pitch or a 4-pitch pitcher, I would expect some big-time regression in 2025. And what's even weirder about it is there's the argument of you have 9 pitches, it's hard to make all 9 of them really good. And I would agree with that statement. It should be difficult, but Seth Lugo made it happen last year. And a lot of those pitches are thrown in the game. He doesn't throw all of them equally. There might be a pitch he only throws 3 or 4 times, but if you throw it one time to a hitter in that lineup, he's got to think about it the next go around. He's going to have to worry about that type of offering. And to me, with Seth Lugo trying to build off what he did last year, that arsenal, that variety of pitches is going to get him far in a lot of starts. Because guess what? If one pitch isn't working, you can go to 8 others to try to get you out of it. And yeah, some of them are similar. The slider, the slurve, and the sweeper and the curveball, they're all pretty comparable. But there's a slight difference to each and every one of them, and that's what makes him unique. That's what makes him special. I'm not worried about him going into 2025. Not saying 200-plus innings is going to be doable again or a 3.00 ERA, but I'm not expecting this fall off, and it's because of those reasons, those 9 reasons, I should say, of getting him through starts. So for Seth Lugo, even though he gave up the 3-run home run today, he was using all 9 of his pitches, and with that command that he possesses, it's going to get him 20-plus quality starts again, and hopefully he can build off of what was such a remarkable season in 2024. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to thank you for watching today's episode of Locked On Royals and making this your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB as baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to break down a little bit of that Rockies and Michael Wacha start, we should say, and some of the guys that are showing out once again in camp. Jack Caglione, a 2-for-2 day. Bobby Witt Jr. got his first hit. Drew Waters actually had 2 hits as well. Vinny Pasquantino was scorching the ball today. And even though I was a little bit critical of Kyle Isbell, it's mainly because, I do want to see him be that league average hitter. His average isn't terrible right now, still around 286 after a 2-hit performance today. But I want to see more than just the singles hitter. I want to see the all fields type of hitter, might channel into that power a little bit more, because we saw for a point in time Kyle Isbell could be that league average hitter. Hoping he can do the same for an extended period in 2025. We'll talk about all of that tomorrow, but until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.